Welcome, wanderers of the dark, to another episode of Abyss of Horror. Tonight I have a tale that will tighten its grip on your soul and refuse to let go. Imagine this: an opera house, abandoned for decades, suddenly resurrected from decay with a new performance. No words, no explanation, just a hauntingly beautiful requiem that pulls you in like a moth to a flame. But those who enter never come back. Would you risk stepping inside, if only to glimpse the macabre symphony that never ends? Hold your breath, my friends, and step with me into the depths of despair. Tonight we unveil the sinister mystery of the Cadaver Choir. It began with a rumor, a whisper that seeped through the cracked pavement and murky alleys of the forgotten district. The old Tchaikovsky opera house, long condemned and festering with mold and dust, had reopened its doors. No grand announcement, no fanfare. Just a blood-red banner draped across its splintered entrance, proclaiming, "One night only, the wordless requiem." The banner appeared overnight, and no one saw who put it there. Curious souls gathered at dawn, peering through fogged windows and stained glass, only to find the lobby flickering with dim candlelight. An air of dread clung to the walls, as if the building itself were gasping for breath. By evening, the doors were ajar, inviting, almost seductive. Despite the unease gnawing at their minds, people shuffled inside, driven by morbid curiosity or an inexplicable compulsion. Samuel Yates was not a man easily swayed by superstition. As an investigative journalist, he'd made a career out of exposing urban legends and local hysteria for what they truly were: fabricated tales and mass delusion. Yet this one intrigued him. Disappearances clustered around the opera house, whispers of something sinister lurking within. He couldn't resist. Armed with a notepad, a camera, and his indomitable skepticism, Samuel ventured inside. He arrived late, the velvet rope still swaying as if freshly disturbed. The foyer was swathed in velvet and decay, peeling wallpaper, shattered chandeliers dangling like skeletal fingers. He followed the faint strains of music, eerie, ethereal, and profoundly haunting. The melody flowed through the halls like liquid sorrow, and Samuel felt his throat tighten. And when midnight struck, the performance began. Pushing through the heavy double doors of the main auditorium, he froze. The vast hall was filled, every seat occupied. Men and women sat rigid, their eyes fixed on the stage. Samuel squinted at their faces and felt a shiver crawl up his spine, ashen, unmoving, almost waxen. The stage curtains billowed as if breathing and then slowly parted. What he saw next drained the blood from his face. The choir stood in precise lines, figures draped in moth-eaten robes, pale and rigid, their heads hanging low. At first, Samuel thought they were actors in elaborate makeup, but as the music surged, their heads snapped up in unison, and the voices swelled. Inhumanly beautiful, eerily synchronized. Their mouths moved, but the sound seemed to emanate from deep within, as if drawn from the bowels of the earth. He raised his camera to capture the surreal scene, but something tugged at his attention. A fetid odor wafting through the air. Rotting flesh. He adjusted his lens and zoomed in on the choir, his heart hammering against his ribs. The singers' faces were taut with death. Sunken eyes glistening with some unnatural light, lips cracked and bloodless. Some had threads visible at the corners of their mouths, their jaws manipulated like marionettes. Samuel staggered back, bile rising in his throat. These weren't performers, they were corpses, decayed and grotesque, held upright by cruel strings stretching from the rafters like spider silk. Their heads jerked and swayed with each note, guided by unseen hands. He glanced upward and caught a glimpse of thick, glistening tendrils weaving through the rafters, pulsating as if alive. He turned to the audience, hoping someone else was seeing the horror, but they sat motionless, eyes glazed, mouths agape, entranced by the ungodly melody. He leaned closer to a woman in the front row and noticed her skin was peeling, her cheeks collapsing inward as if decomposing from the inside. She didn't blink, didn't breathe. Samuel felt the walls closing in. The music grew louder, drilling into his skull, each note a razor across his sanity. He stumbled backward, desperate to flee, but the doors had vanished, replaced by crumbling walls and crimson drapes that seemed to stretch and writhe like flesh. Then he heard it. A whisper threading through the symphony, growing louder, harmonizing with the requiem. Join us. Sing with us. Death is forever. He slapped his hands over his ears, but the voices penetrated, sinking like hooks into his brain. He tried to scream, but his mouth wouldn't obey. Instead, a resonant, mournful note poured from his lips, foreign and unnatural. His hands trembled as he felt his throat vibrating in harmony with the unholy choir. His reflection in the cracked mirror by the stage horrified him. His skin paling, eyes glazing over, lips curling into a macabre smile as the song took hold of him. He fought to move his legs, but they rooted to the floor, and his hands rose to his throat as though directed by invisible strings. The choir's leader, a towering figure with hollow eye sockets and a gaping, toothless grin, beckoned him forward. Samuel's body obeyed, puppet-like, stumbling onto the stage where the rotting singers made room. As he took his place, his voice joined theirs, an agonizing melody of despair and surrender. The following morning, the opera house was silent again. Its doors closed, the banner gone. No trace of the audience remained, nor of Samuel Yates. Local authorities marked it off as another disappearance linked to the cursed building. And soon the legend faded into urban myth. But those who lived nearby claimed to hear faint singing drifting through the night air. Melancholic and twisted as if carried from beyond the grave. A requiem for lost souls echoing through the city streets. Some say the performance continues, drawing new victims whenever the house decides to awaken. They say that if you listen too closely to the melody, you might find yourself walking toward the opera house, your will no longer your own, compelled to join the phantom choir? Would you dare listen to the melody that calls from the shadows? Or will you cover your ears and pray the music never finds you? Let me know in the comments. How far would your curiosity take you? And if stories like this keep your nightmares fed and your pulse racing, make sure to subscribe to the Abyss of Horror. Your darkest fears await, and they're just getting started.